Okay, yes, right. Okay, we should be live. I am noticing that I am like really starting to get tired. Not just from all the streams, but also like stuff happened. So I'm very happy that this is the second to last one. Do we get any audio here? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. So stream manager like that. And that's pretty cool. Yes. Okay. Good. Hello OBS. Could you start working again? That would be nice. Thank you. Okay. Right. So today is gonna be the final roll because after that there's only one thing left. So, just give me a second, just in case. Oh, sorry about that, a little interruption, but right, now where was I? Yes, final roll. And okay, 2. So that means that today it will be plane related yaps, and then tomorrow it will be the water game. Flight related yaps. And then the category would have to be chatting. And then that's it. Yeah, okay, cool. Also, let me just do this visually on for myself. Okay, now where do we... Okay, window... Okay, there we go. Paint. Like I have a specific capture just for Microsoft Paint. There we go. That's not looking quite... Oh. Yeah, that is odd. Right. There we go. Okay. Cool. So let me just... boop. Okay, yes, that's good. And then we do this, of course. And then for this one, no outline and solid fill. And then I think we swap the colors. No, because then we do this. And then we can just do this. And then we can just go. Okay, yes. Okay, good. Yes. Right. Okay, so far so good. Now I will just grab my notes. And then we've got like a bunch of and then we've got like a bunch of topics. Yeah. So here's a fun fact about BeamNG. You know, like some of you have probably heard of this game, because well, it's known as a driving game. But to be a good driving game, you need physics. You need pretty accurate physics. Which means that people didn't have to actually modify it have to modify it for flight. Like all they had to do was just design the physical thing, with, like the density and shapes and whatever, to just get flight. They didn't need to mess with the physics engine. All they had to do was just model a plane or any sort of like air vehicle, and then it worked. Just give it the power, and I don't know whether BeamNG also comes with wind, but it's like the basic air physics and air resistance did do the trick for making planes work in BeamNG, which I think is actually a pretty cool fact about the game. Mm-hmm. And now I will just like be discussing the show Air Crash Investigation. Like ACI. I know that's also actually something. So let me just say Air Doku. Like it's a documentary series. Like it does have a bit of like sensationalism in it, right? It's not just like purely meant as information. It's definitely meant as entertainment. So, but still pretty interesting, and like actually pick up a few things. But one of my gripes with the show is that they say accident pretty much always, and 90% of, well, maybe, and there's a lot of cases. Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, but there are also some where either there was such severe negligence, or just like a intentional risk. Like, oh hey, there's an issue with the design, for example, and this manufacturer knows that, and they just don't change anything. They don't recall. They don't put out a maintenance order or anything at all. They just move on as if nothing's wrong. And that's like, I mean, like you can't really call it an accident anymore now, can you? But I guess technically, sure, I suppose it is. But there's also a bunch of incidents where it was not an accident at all. Like, oh, you just have a pilot that's not really all good, or like maybe there's some other organization involved. Maybe someone just really hates civilian airplanes and was like very willing and knowing, or it's whatever happens. Sometimes it's very much intentional, and then the show still tends to use the word accident, and I'm like, no, like most of the time, yeah, sure, it's an accident, but sometimes it's not, right? So incident would be like a more correct word, really, for any and all cases, because like regardless of the nature of the incident, it is an incident. Like all accidents are incidents, but not all incidents are accidents, right? And and as I was thinking this, I was also reminded of that scene from Hot Fuzz, where it was like, well, accident implies lack of fault. It's like, okay, like, sure, like there can be fault and still be an accident, right? But there's also some cases where like, yeah, like it's just, yeah, it's you should just be using instant, and then you're always right. Yeah. You. Okay, now let me do this and just avoid that thingy. And I have also, you know what? I'm not gonna go into the details of anything that was like blatantly intentional, because that feels like a bit too. Uh, like I don't know, it's like the sort of territory that maybe you shouldn't get into on stream. But there are also a few where you know like it was excellent. And then what I think of first are some of the Dutch or Dutch related. Ow, fucking hell! Ow. Sorry, I hit my hand on the table. Are some of the Dutch or Dutch related incidents? Because some of you might know of Tenerife, right? And also, I'm pretty sure that was KLM or KLM, Koninklijke Luchtvaartmaatschappij, something like that, like the Royal Air Travel Company, something like that. And what was the layout of the thing again? Oh, okay. So you have a plane here, just you know, on the runway, and it was ordered to go somewhere there, right? But that's too much of a turning circle, so you know so instead they were like, okay, hey, we can't make that, so we do this, and then I'm pretty sure on this side you had the KLM plane, and they thought like, okay, you know, hey, in this amount of time this would have been cleared, and so they just decided, oh hey, let's go, you know, because they asked like air traffic control for instructions, right, for what to do after takeoff, and you know they said that, but the pilot thought that meant like, okay, so we're cleared for takeoff already, and that's how you're getting the instructions for after that. And also there are some other things to the phrasing that goes a bit of a miscommunication, but ultimately one of the key issues was that the pilot did not actually ask for permission to leave. It was just when he thought it was clear, instead of just being like, okay, hey, we need to go, can we go? They were just like, okay, let's go. Just woo. And you know, like he said that, and so both this plane and air traffic control, they were like, hey, wait a minute, that's not what you're supposed to do, because like, hey, we are still like around here, like they haven't turned off yet, and air traffic control is also like, hey, we don't give you clearance, but they had that at the exact same time. So that means that, you know, like the radio transmission just got jumbled into each other, and so all they got was just some distorted sound. And what's also very important to know is that it was very foggy, right? So visibility was really limited. Because of course, if it was clear, then you know they would have a sight line, you know, and they could see like, oh wait, that plane's still there. but it was soggy, so they couldn't see. So they had to rely on the communications only, and then they didn't really do a procedure. And yeah, like this one was still here, and this one was going for takeoff, and well, and then the moment they saw them, like they tried to do something, but like they still clipped the plane, and if pretty sure both of them, or well, at least this one was pretty full because the start of the run, which means you're gonna get a ton of jet fuel and just absolute carnage and tons of deaths. And the worst of all, it was incredibly preventable. Like it could have been avoided so easily. And it's like, okay, so you have this factor, and you have this factor, and you have this factor. Right? Because if visibility, then it wouldn't have happened. If only one of them responded right away when they said they were going to leave, then the communication would have gone through. If the phrasing was a bit clearer, but it's also like that it actually led to rules around that being adapted. But if the phrasing would have been a bit clearer, then that could have been avoided, because then the pilot wouldn't have misunderstood. But also the pilot was supposed to ask for the permission to leave in the first place, which he didn't. So right, okay, but that's not all, because it was kind of strange that this pilot in particular would do that, because he was very experienced and had like an exemplary record. Just wonderful skill, very serious, very disciplined, and even had an important role in safety. So it's like, okay, how could this pilot specifically, like out of all the pilots, how could it be this one that ends up causing a crash like that? And then they find out that he hadn't flown in quite a while, but that he had just done a lot of simulations. And in simulations, right, there is no ATC. So in simulations, like the pilot that's training the other pilot takes the role of the ATC and makes the calls. And so that is suspected to have like mentally influenced him to be a bit more like assertive and a bit more just taking control for himself, which then led him to not follow like proper procedure this time and just go. And wow, many dead. Many dead. But it did lead to changes, right? It did lead to changes. Now, one of those was clearer communication protocol. Okay. There we go. Clearer comms. And I don't recall every detail, but maybe seeing as that was also like a pretty significant factor. So it would stand to reason at least that this would also have happened. You know, that they would have actually decided to add air traffic control as a role in flight sim, in flight simulators. But yeah, of course the main thing is just clearer communications to like leave less room for misinterpretation, and you know, like that's a pretty good thing. Now this is one that happened in the Netherlands, and that is, I mean, you might have heard of it before, but that is the Belmer crash. And there, you know, like you've got your plane, right? And it's got a few engines. Yeah. And this one, I think it was metal fatigue, right? Which means that one of the parts holding the engine in place just gave out, and then the engine broke away, which, you know, took out another engine. So now you've also got like misaligned thrust. Because like, say an engine goes out on one side and on the other side, then at least both sides would still have thrust, right? But here, you know, like one side was just entirely taken out, which already makes it way harder to control the plane. But you know, in the process of breaking away, it also damaged some of the hydraulic systems. Which, well, first of all, it just made it way harder to control everything, right? But second, it meant that when they returned to the airport to, you know, make an emergency landing, when they slowed down, they couldn't perform the action to keep it in control because that system was just out, and instead they just so instead of just like slowing down and losing a bit of altitude, and gradually making your way to the runway, the plane reached a point where it just suddenly dropped, and point of no return. Like there at that point there was no recovering this, no pulling it back. That was just it was curtains. Yeah, it was end of story. But I do believe that a maintenance order was put out, so that all planes of that make and model would be checked for the damage, and apparently there were quite a few that had that same damage that could go at any second. So you know, if the investigation had been just a little slower, then chances of more incidents like this happening were pretty significant. Now, what is interesting though is that, you know, like, it was an apartment building, and I saw and you see like news clips and stuff of it, and you know, you've got this whole apartment complex, right? Just, you know, like this. Well, I mean, like this, just a simplification, of course. It's like that sort of complicated shape, and it was just straight up, just this whole area was just entirely carved out. It was just gone, right? Just nothing, just nothing left. Like it was just from the very top to the bottom. It was just straight up as if someone just cut out a bit of the building. And surprisingly, only I think only a few dozen in the building died, and then of course the staff. But fortunately, like I know, like, yeah, okay, it's still a tragedy, right? But the plane was cargo, and so you know you only had a few crew and only a few people on the plane. So it could have been way worse. Like if it was a passenger plane, loads with hundreds of people, then God, imagine, or don't. But like that's like, well, bad is bad, but whew, it was close because again there were a bunch of also passenger variants of the plane that had that same damage that managed to get repaired in time. So it could have been any one of those just as well. And right. Okay, so here's something about the investigation that it kind of shocked me when I saw that, and that's that the city just dumps all of the rubble from the crash site instead of just letting it be. Dumps right? Instead of just letting it be so that it could properly be investigated, it just got all the rubble just moved away ASAP, which damaged evidence, made it harder to find things because it gets mixed up and it's also spread out over multiple sites. So basically, they saw that something like this has happened, and instead of like genuinely trying to, helping the investigation, they were just like, oh hey, let's fucking sabotage that. So still, pretty surprising that they managed to figure it out despite this, even though it must have slowed things down to some degree. Oh, and also apparently the Netherlands didn't even have an air investigation division or anything like that. Just nothing. No department, no branch. Just this guy that they hired, and so they actually had to contact the United States and the NTSB there to actually be able to figure out what happened, because they didn't, at least at that point, have their own organization or anything like that for that. It's like, damn bro. Okay, and now there's this other crash. I believe it happened in the US, right? And it was a mid-air collision. So you got a plane, and you got another plane, and they just hit each other, right? Now that's pretty unlikely, usually. Because yes, there's a lot of planes, but there's also a lot of space. And to be at the same spot at the exact same time is pretty unlikely. But one of them was a civilian, and one of them was military. And there's some systems to, like, ping your location. Also for other planes nearby, just so you can avoid each other. But usually you've got ATC organizing you to follow certain heights, certain altitudes, certain directions, headings, specific designated flight corridors. But then even if something goes wrong there, then you've got other systems to try and limit the chance that something happens, right? But apparently, for some reason, the civilian air traffic just communicated like normally, but military, it just didn't. No, it was just on its own frequency, doing its own thing, and yeah, well, you see what happened there. So after that incident, I do believe that regulations were shored up a little to actually make sure that if you're gonna be sharing an airspace, if you're gonna be like intersecting with civilian air traffic, you actually have to communicate with the ATC, with the air traffic control, and I also think that the radios are now also set to that. So, that should be it. But yeah, this one also incredibly avoidable. Like it was so ridiculously preventable, right? Okay, and now just on a cheerier note, we're just gonna switch to a different air-related topic, and that is games with flying controls, flight controls. Yeah, there we go, flight games. Okay, so some use the good or reliable. Wait, no, WASD, right? Oops, right? And some use arrows. So like up, down, left, right, etc. And some work with space, right? Space. Cool. And others they only let you control on one axis, for example, like the sides, and then your forward thrust is gonna determine your height. Or others have you used the cursor, mouse, and sometimes it's like related to clicks, sometimes it's just like how you move the mouse. and I do think it's interesting how you've got like all these different sort of control systems. I don't really know what I prefer. I mean, it also depends on the game, I would say. Right? There's some where you just want to keep it like really simple, but others where you want to have a bit more going on. You know, like maybe space is just for power then, and then this is for the pitch and yaw and whatever. But I also think the one where you use the mouse is pretty neat. If it doesn't require like a ton of like very quick adjustments, because then it can be pretty tricky to get like all the movements in place, right? But I don't think I've seen one that's much of an issue. Oh, and also there's some that have invert, and that's because like in actual plane, you know, you got your little control stick, right? And if you pull it back, then the plane goes up. Like you tell the plane to go up, and if you pull it forwards, then it tells the plane to go down. Which of course does not match like the things you're normally used to. When, for example, like you just see forwards as forwards, and well, if you're talking about verticality, then your progression would be upwards, right? So then W would be you go up, and S would be you go down. But some have it to sort of like match the actual real life flight, and they have invert controls. And maybe it's not W and S, but some other system where you actually need to make that mental shift. Though a lot of the time they just have a toggle, right, and they can just turn it on or leave it off if you want. Now you can just kind of do what you want. And now, speaking of flight controls in games, there's one game I played this month where I did not expect to see flight controls, because it was a driving game, and specifically it was the game called I Am Dead, Where Are My Keys? I am... Oh wait, that would be A, right? I am dead, where are my keys? So, or also Yat Wumk, Yatwumk, Yatwumk, I don't know. Some games lend themselves more to initialisms or acronyms than others do. Basically, if they lend themselves to it, then it's acronym, and if it doesn't, then it's initialism. You know, for example, like FNAF, it's like, you can easily say that. And TF2, then it's like, okay, that's an initialism. Anyway, now we're shifting to the topic of linguistics. That's also something I like to discuss, by the way. Because, well, first of all, I just genuinely think that stuff is interesting. And second of all, it helps me repeat knowledge and pull it back up so that I don't forget it. Because, hey, it's part of my studies and of my course, and it's probably good to keep some of that knowledge. Because, you build on knowledge. It's not just, you learn new stuff. No, you learn stuff, and it's related to stuff a lot of the time. But yeah, okay, so there was this one game called I Am Dead, Where Are My Keys? And there you had to collect 7 candy. 7 candy, right? But when you unlock 2, you just fly. And well, it's sort of like you're just driving through the air, and then your direction is indeed controlled by your mouse. So that was a little weird, to be honest. It was like out of nowhere, and I was like, okay, hey, what's going on now? Especially because the graphical style made it a bit difficult to see what was going on. It took a few seconds to see, oh, hey, we are flying. But then once I did finally figure that out, I could just... Sorry, my brain is like really like turning into mush. Especially because despite the fact that the weather said it was going to cool down, it's still being stupid and ridiculous and stupid again. Okay, fuck it, I'm turning on my fan again. There. Okay. Yes, okay, that's better, Jesus. Okay. So I was saying, right, okay, so after collecting 2 candies, you get the flight. And it was a little confusing for a bit, but for a few seconds, but then you got the hang of it, and it was like, okay, so we just go forwards, and we move the mouse to determine our direction. And after that, it was pretty manageable. It was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. But yeah, it still wasn't like the smoothest, So this set of controls, I can work with it, especially in a game as simple and as short as that. Like you don't mind a little jank or clunkiness. But for any larger projects, the controls gotta be a bit different. And with that, I think that's it for today. Yeah. So thanks for stopping by. I do, of course, hope you get a nice day, and hope to see people stop by again. Right, just one more stream, and then I'll same time tomorrow, and that's gonna be Amity, a water game, and then I'm just gonna take a break for a bit because the daily streams for a month, like even if most of them are pretty short, it starts cutting in at some point, right? It really does. It really does. And with that, I would like to say thank you and goodbye.